So astral projection, out-of-body experiences. I mean, for most of us, those terms immediately conjure up, you know, images of wild sci-fi movies
Right,
or
yeah.
like some mystical guru meditating on a mountaintop for 40 years.
Exactly. It sounds like pure fantasy.
Totally. Or just sheer hallucination. But today, we are doing a deep dive into the Seth material. Specifically, texts like Seth, dreams and projections of consciousness, Seth speaks, and the nature of the psyche. And what's wild is that Seth talks about leaving your physical body like it's uh, like it's just a completely normal, everyday occurrence.
It's an autonomic biological function, according to the text.
Right. So the premise for you listening today is this.
Yeah.
What if you and me and everyone else on Earth actually leaves our physical bodies every single night?
We do. We all do it.
Which is just a massive thing to wrap your head around. So our mission today is to figure out if this is actually real, how the mechanics of it work, and I guess most importantly, why you would ever want to actually wake up and experience it consciously.
It really just completely upends the conventional neurological model of sleep, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
We're so conditioned to view sleep as this passive state. Just a period where the physical body is resting and the brain is sweeping out cellular debris.
Like organizing files on a hard drive.
Right, exactly. But Seth introduces a radically different framework. And to ground this right away, I want to read a direct quote from the text to you. Seth states, very plainly, projection is simply a focusing of consciousness in a different dimension of reality. You do it every night in sleep, though you do not remember.
Wow. Though you do not remember.
Yeah. Notice he doesn't say you might do it, or that you can, learn to do it if you're special.
Right. He states you are already doing it.
Involuntarily. As a required function of your existence, it instantly normalizes the whole thing. It takes it from being this occult mystery to just an unexplored function of human anatomy.
Okay, but that normalization is exactly where I want to push back a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if you're telling me my consciousness is going on a road trip without me every night,
A nightly excursion.
right. If it's doing that, we have a major perception problem. Because, I mean, why does it just feel like a really weird, chaotic dream?
That is the perfect question.
Because we all have those standard REM state dreams, right? Where you're walking through your childhood home, but suddenly the walls are made of cheese.
And you're late for a math exam you didn't study for.
Exactly. If we are genuinely traveling outside the physical body, why does the data look like a malfunctioning rendering engine? How is this different from just a vivid dream?
Well, the distinction is entirely in the translation mechanism of your physical brain. When your consciousness projects, it enters environments that just do not operate on physical laws.
What Seth calls Framework 1,
Right,
our
right.
waking reality.
Right. Framework 1 is governed by gravity, linear time, solid matter. But the non-physical environments operate on entirely different physics. They're based on emotional resonance, immediate materialization of thought, non-linear time.
Okay, so consciousness experiences something profound out there.
Yeah.
But then it tries to download that experience back into the physical brain when you wake up.
And the brain simply lacks the vocabulary to process it. It's an organ that evolved to interpret physical data.
So just panics.
It completely panics. It's suddenly handed this massive packet of multidimensional, nonlinear data, and it attempts to force it into familiar physical symbols so the waking ego can tolerate it.
Oh, wow. So it uses like your memories, your daily
Or
anxieties.
familiar locations, yes. That bizarre dream with the cheese walls and the math exam is actually a heavily censored symbolic translation of a very real non-physical event.
Wait, really? So the math exam isn't just random brain static?
Not according to Seth. The original experience might have been, say, an intense interaction with another consciousness or an exploration of a probable reality, but your brain overlaid it with the imagery of a high school exam because the underlying emotional frequency felt like being tested.
I mean, that makes perfect logical sense. It's like trying to run a highly advanced quantum algorithm on a vintage 1980s desktop computer.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
Yes.
The hardware just crashes, or it outputs complete gibberish trying to make sense of the code.
Exactly. The true projection is hidden beneath the camouflage of the dream narrative.
Okay, so the goal of conscious projection isn't to trigger the projection itself, since it's already happening automatically, but to bypass that clumsy translation software of the physical brain.
Precisely. You want to bring your waking awareness along for the ride, to maintain an unbroken line of critical, alert consciousness while the physical organism shuts down.
So you can see the environment directly, without the symbolic dream filter.
Right. But to understand how to keep that awareness awake, we have to look at the mechanics of why the consciousness actually leaves the body in the first place.
Yeah, let's get into the mechanics, because Seth introduces this really fascinating biochemical concept here. He talks about chemical excesses, right?
He does. He doesn't attribute projection to some vague spiritual mist. It's highly mechanical.
It sounds almost like a combustion engine. He's arguing that our intense focus on physical reality literally generates a biochemical byproduct. Can you break that down?
Sure. Think of your multidimensional consciousness as this immense, highly pressurized stream of energy.
Okay.
During your waking hours, you are forcing all of that immense energy through the incredibly narrow aperture of the physical nervous system.
Just to deal with linear time and spatial navigation.
Right. You're compressing a nonlinear awareness to survive a physical day. And this compression, this intense outward focus, generates friction.
Like electrical resistance in a wire.
Exactly.
The narrower the gauge of the wire, the more resistance and the more heat is generated as a byproduct.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. The intense concentration required to maintain the illusion of physical reality synthesizes a specific energetic chemical excess in the body. It's a form of tension.
So just by going to work, answering emails, driving a car,
You are charging up a pressurized capacitor throughout your entire waking day.
and obviously there's a biological limit to how much of that friction the body can take.
Absolutely. If that chemical excess wasn't released, the physical nervous system would literally short circuit. It would be overwhelmed. So sleep is not merely a mechanism for resting your muscles.
Sleep is the biological trigger that releases the valve.
Yes. When the physical body sleeps and sensory input is cut off, that accumulated chemical excess is discharged. And that discharge acts as the literal fuel that launches the consciousness out of the physical matrix.
Wow, so the energy flow just reverses.
It reverses. Instead of flowing outward into physical materialization, it uses the fuel to flow inward. Your consciousness rides that wave of released tension to explore what Seth calls Framework 2.
Okay, we need to rigorously define framework too.
Yeah.
Because it's a foundational concept in the Seth material, and I feel like it's so easy to misinterpret it as like a cloudy afterlife or some mythical heaven realm.
It is definitely not that. Framework 2 is the dimension of interior reality.
Right, the blueprint level.
Exactly. If Framework 1 is the physical world we observe, the world of chairs, bodies, buildings, final products, then Framework 2 is the factory where those products are designed.
It's pure energy and probabilities.
Right. Everything that currently exists in physical reality is first conceived, negotiated, and constructed in Framework 2. So when you project at night, you are returning to this primary dimension.
But what are we actually doing there? If my physical body is just lying on the mattress regenerating cells, what is the agenda of my projecting consciousness? Is it just hanging out?
Oh, not at all. The workload is staggering. According to Seth, you are engaged in massive amounts of psychological and energetic maintenance.
Like what kind of maintenance?
You're processing the complex emotional data of your day without the limitations of physical time. You are exploring probable futures.
Wait, like running simulations?
Exactly like running simulations, you're testing out choices you might make tomorrow to see their outcomes.
That is wild.
You're also communicating telepathically with the consciousnesses of other people, resolving conflicts, planning collaborations that will eventually play out in the physical world.
So the heavy lifting of existence is actually happening while we're asleep.
Completely. You're rendering the upcoming environments for your physical waking life.
Okay, which brings me to the absolute core conclusion of this whole deep dive for the listener. If my inner self is already out there doing all this essential, complex work perfectly fine in the background.
Why interfere?
Yeah. Why do I need to wake up in that state? What is the practical application for you or me to actively try and achieve conscious awareness during this process? Why risk messing up a perfectly good autonomic function?
It's a really fair question. The benefits outlined in the texts operate on a few different existential levels, but the most profound, the absolute most paradigm-shifting benefit is the direct, undeniable experience of your own multidimensional nature.
Meaning you get objective proof for yourself that you are more than just biological hardware.
Yes. Seth emphasizes that having this direct experience, feeling yourself fully conscious, fully rational, while completely disconnected from your physical form, it radically alters your relationship with mortality.
It reduces the fear of death.
It fundamentally reduces or even completely eradicates the fear of death.
Okay, I want to challenge the ease of that claim, though.
Yeah.
Because the fear of death isn't just some philosophical position we adopt, right?
So it's biological.
Right. It is the core operating system of the organism. Every cell in our body is hardwired to avoid cessation. So how does one subjective, temporary experience in a non-physical state just override millions of years of evolutionary survival instinct?
Because the experience overrides the intellect. You no longer have to rely on religious faith or, philosophical speculation that consciousness survives death.
You have experiential data.
Exactly. You have experiential data. You have literally been outside the vehicle. And you observe that the you who perceives, analyzes, and feels remains entirely intact. In fact, in many ways, it feels enhanced.
So when you return to the body, that data integrates into your waking ego.
Yes. The ego realizes it is just a subset of a much larger identity. Now, the biological survival instinct remains intact. You're still going to jump out of the way of a speeding car.
Sure, you don't want to break the vehicle.
Right. But that deep psychological dread of existential annihilation, it dissolves.
I mean, the psychological freedom that would generate in your daily waking life must be immense. If you remove that subconscious hum of existential dread, your bandwidth for other pursuits would just expand exponentially.
It absolutely does. And the texts point to highly practical daily applications, too. By consciously accessing Framework 2, you are consciously accessing the wellspring of all creativity.
Right, because that's the factory.
Exactly. Seth discusses how much of our problem-solving and artistic inspiration is generated at these non-physical levels. When you bring your analytical mind into those spaces, you stop being a passive recipient of inspiration.
You become an active participant. You can literally go seek out specific healing insights.
You can communicate directly with deeper layers of your own psyche. And honestly, you experience a profound sense of physical and psychological liberation.
Just the sheer experiential joy of existing without gravity, moving without the drag coefficient of biological matter. It sounds incredibly enticing.
It is.
But, okay, we have to address the immediate counterweight to that excitement.
The fear.
The sheer visceral terror of the unknown. Let's look at the psychology of the listener who's actually going to try this. You're lying in bed. You actually feel the mechanics of separation begin.
You feel yourself detaching.
Right. The immediate biological response of the waking mind is going to be sheer panic.
Right.
What if I get stuck out there? What if the physical body is left vacant and something else takes over?
Those fears are universally common.
So we need to look closely at the safety mechanisms Seth describes.
Yes. And the Seth material is incredibly rigorous about these safety protocols. This is a natural function. Remember, the primary mechanism is the energetic tether.
Often called the silver cord, right?
Yeah. Right, but Seth avoids that purely mystical imagery. He emphasizes repeatedly that the projecting consciousness is never, under any circumstances, severed from the physical organism while it lives.
So how does he describe the mechanics of this connection? Because we shouldn't think of it as a literal physical rope stretching across dimensions.
No, a much more accurate analogy would be quantum entanglement.
Oh, interesting.
The physical body and the projecting consciousness remain deeply entangled, regardless of the perceived distance or dimensional shift between them. They operate in continuous, instantaneous resonance.
So if the physical body requires attention,
A shift in room temperature, a sudden loud noise, or an internal biological necessity, that information is communicated instantaneously across the entanglement. And the projecting consciousness is snapped back into the physical frame immediately.
so the physical body holds the ultimate trump card. It's an autonomic override.
Always. And that override is also triggered by the emotional state of the projecting consciousness itself.
Wait, really?
Yes. The absolute moment the individual feels a spike of genuine panic or fear, the entanglement collapses back into the physical state.
Instantaneously.
Instantaneously. Seth notes that the primary difficulty for people beginning to explore this consciously is not getting locked out of their body. The difficulty is managing to stay out.
Because the slightest tremor of fear causes a retraction.
Exactly. You open your eyes and you are wide awake, safely in your bed.
Okay, well, that reframes the entire process. The fear of getting lost or stuck is structurally impossible according to these mechanics.
Structurally impossible.
The system is designed to default to the physical body at the slightest provocation, which means fear itself isn't a warning sign of actual danger. Fear is just a lack of education about the environment.
That is an excellent summation. Seth states explicitly that fear is the only real barrier to projection.
Because the waking ego's job is to protect the physical form.
Right. When the ego senses the center of awareness shifting away from the physical senses, it interprets that shift as a system failure. It thinks you are dying, so it sounds the alarm.
So learning to project consciously is largely just a process of re-educating the ego.
Soothing it, yes. Demonstrating through gentle, repeated exposure that this shift in focus is entirely safe.
All right, I want to pivot to the epistemological problem here, the issue of proof. Let's say I successfully soothe my ego. I feel the separation. I'm looking at my physical room from a perspective outside my physical eyes.
Okay.
How do I objectively prove to myself that I'm not just experiencing a highly sophisticated, internally generated neurological simulation?
The lucid dreaming argument?
Exactly. How do we definitively separate conscious projection from a lucid dream? Because in a lucid dream, I know I'm dreaming, I have my critical faculties, and I can control the environment. How is this mechanically different from a brain highly stimulated by acetylcholine during REM sleep?
Seth addresses this precise skepticism, and he provides specific, observable criteria to differentiate a true projection from a lucid dream. The primary metric is environmental stability, or what he calls hyperrealism.
Break down hyperrealism. What does that actually look and feel like?
In a typical lucid dream, even when you possess conscious awareness, the environment remains fundamentally fluid. It is highly responsive to your immediate subconscious expectations.
So if I'm standing in a room and I look away and look back,
The furniture might have changed, or the door now leads to a forest instead of a hallway. The structural integrity is constantly morphing because it's being generated entirely by your own isolated psychological vocabulary.
right, the rendering engine can't maintain object permanence because it isn't an objective reality. It's a closed-loop projection of my own mind.
Exactly. But in a true conscious projection, you are stepping out of your closed psychological loop. You are entering an objective, non-physical environment.
Or at least an environment shared by other consciousnesses.
Yes. Therefore, the environment possesses strict stability. A room remains a room. If you look away and look back, the architecture is unchanged.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Furthermore, the sensory data you receive in a projection feels significantly more intense, crisp, and vivid than waking physical life.
Wait, more vivid than physical reality.
Yes. Physical reality, by comparison, feels sluggish, muted, heavy. When you project, you aren't filtering perception through the biological limitations of physical eyes and ears. You're perceiving directly through the inner senses.
So if I'm in this state and I try to alter the environment with my mind like trying to make a wall disappear and the wall refuses to vanish.
That resistance is actually proof that you are interacting with a stable construct outside your own isolated neurology.
Wow. Okay, but even with that resistance, someone could still argue it's just a really good simulation, right?
They could. But Seth makes a deeper philosophical point regarding this demand for proof. He argues that the subjective feeling of existing independently of the physical form carries its own self-evident validation.
You know, because you know.
Exactly. And more provocatively, he suggests that even if an extreme skeptic were to categorize the experience entirely as a complex hallucination, the transformative impact of that hallucination remains permanent.
Well, yeah. If the hallucination fundamentally shatters your belief that you are strictly biological hardware, the ontological shock is identical, regardless of how you classify the mechanics.
Right. It's like seeing a new color. Once the brain processes the data, you cannot unknow it. Your worldview must expand to accommodate the new variable.
I love that. But to move this discussion from abstract mechanics to highly documented empirical evidence, we have to look at the specific trajectory of Jane Roberts herself.
Yes, the author and medium through whom the Seth material was dictated.
Her journey provides the most rigorous, observable case study of everything we're discussing, because she was not some credulous mystic seeking magical experiences.
Not at all.
From everything I've read in her personal notes, she was a highly intellectual, analytical writer. She had a deep skepticism regarding the supernatural.
She was initially resistant to the very material she was channeling.
Right. So how did a rationalist like Jane bridge the gap from just channeling texts to actually experiencing the mechanics of conscious projection herself?
Her introduction to conscious projection was largely spontaneous, which is common when an individual begins to engage deeply with multidimensional concepts.
The intellectual engagement loosens the rigidity of the waking ego.
Exactly. Her experiences often occurred initially without her conscious intent, though they were later guided by Seth to help her map the non-physical environments.
So let's look at the mechanics of her early separations. What did she physically and psychologically report experiencing?
She documented the precise clinical sensations of the process. She described the distinct feeling of her center of awareness shifting out of alignment with her physical brain.
Okay.
She reported floating horizontally, maintaining the exact posture of her physical body, but hovering inches or feet above the mattress.
The cognitive dissonance of that moment must be staggering.
Oh, absolutely.
To be a skeptical adult, fully awake, fully possessing your rational faculties, and to look down and observe your own biological form resting passively below you. I mean, the physical evidence of your own eyes is contradicting the foundational laws of physics you've based your entire reality on.
It was profoundly disorienting for her initially. She had to actively manage the panic of her waking ego to prevent the entanglement from snapping her back immediately.
Right, fighting that autonomic override.
But as she learned to stabilize her emotional state, the fear was replaced by an intense analytical curiosity. And she didn't just hover in the bedroom.
She started traveling.
She began utilizing the lack of physical friction to travel. She navigated her astral body through physical walls, observing the architecture of her neighborhood from a non-physical vantage point.
But see, observation alone still leaves room for the complex hallucination argument. If she only observes, a skeptic could just say her brain is synthesizing memories of her neighborhood into a vivid dream. To break the closed-loop theory, you need interaction with physical matter, and you need third-party corroboration. And Jane actually achieved this, didn't she?
She did, and it stands as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the texts. There is a meticulously documented incident where Jane projected from her sleep state with the specific intent of testing her ability to interact with physical reality.
Well, from a non-physical position.
Right. She navigated to a location entirely separate from her physical body and found herself in a crowded room.
Let's break this down. She's projecting. She's in a non-physical state, but she is perceiving a Framework 1 physical location. What happens next?
In the room, she recognized a friend of hers, Bill McDonnell.
Okay.
Jane realized this was the perfect opportunity to conduct a verifiable test. While entirely out of body, she felt an urgent, directed need to get his attention. Now, we discussed earlier the friction of interacting with physical reality.
Yes, the mismatched frequencies.
For projecting consciousness, physical matter feels incredibly dense, almost like trying to move through wet concrete.
So she had to exert immense, focused intent to do anything.
She did. She approached Bill, reached out with her non-physical form, and physically grasped and shook his shoulder. She described doing it forcefully to ensure the interaction would register.
I mean, the energy required to cross the dimensional threshold and apply kinetic force to physical matter must be immense.
It is, and the expenditure of that energy, combined with the shock of making actual physical contact, triggered the autonomic override.
Ah, so it snapped her back.
The absolute moment she made that intense connection, the entanglement collapsed. She snapped instantly back into her physical body in her own bed, miles away.
But the crucial part of this protocol is what happened next, because she didn't just go back to sleep.
No. Being the rigorous researcher she was, she immediately turned on the light, grabbed her notebook, and wrote down every specific detail of the encounter.
The exact time, the layout of the room,
Who was present, and the precise physical action she took.
and the corroboration. What was Bill's perspective of this event?
Later, the event was entirely verified by the people present in that room. Bill McDonnell and the other attendees confirmed the specific details of the location and the precise timing.
And Bill.
Most importantly, Bill himself confirmed that at that exact minute, he experienced the distinct, undeniable physical sensation of having his shoulder grabbed and forcefully shaken by an unseen hand.
Wow. See, that specific data point completely dismantles the isolated neurology theory.
Completely.
An internal brain hallucination cannot cross physical distance and apply kinetic force to a third-party shoulder. That interaction objectively proves that her consciousness was operating independently of her biology, navigating space and exerting influence.
It forces a reevaluation of everything. And for Jane, the psychological impact of this corroborated experience was monumental. It moved the Seth material out of the realm of abstract channeled philosophy, and into the realm of undeniable, lived reality.
She didn't just believe it anymore. She had the hard data.
She knew it.
How did that shift in perspective affect her daily life? Because you cannot possess that knowledge and continue operating under the standard constraints of society.
It acted as a massive psychological release valve. It eliminated deep-seated creative blocks she'd been wrestling with for years.
Because you realize you aren't confined to a biological machine.
Exactly. Your trust in your own intuitive and creative capacities expands exponentially. It validated the theories of the multidimensional self in the most intimate, irrefutable way possible.
And cemented her dedication to the teachings.
Right. She understood that if this biological and psychological freedom was true for her, it was a fundamental capacity belonging to the entire human species.
Which perfectly transitions our analysis to you, the listener. Because the core thesis of Seth's work is not that Jane Roberts was uniquely gifted. The thesis is that this is the standard operating system for human consciousness.
We all have it.
So for the listener who has been tracking with this logic, who understands the mechanics of the chemical excess, the safety of the quantum entanglement, and the objective reality of the non-physical environment, how do they initiate this process? What is the specific actionable protocol the listener can deploy tonight to begin bypassing the brain's translation software and experience this directly?
Seth provides a highly accessible, fundamentally safe protocol for beginners. We refer to it as the projection awareness intention.
Okay, what does that involve?
It does not require complex visualizations, sensory deprivation, or hours of rigorous meditation. It relies entirely on leveraging the natural biological process of sleep that is already scheduled to happen to you tonight.
So we aren't trying to force a new behavior. We're just trying to piggyback a sliver of waking awareness onto a process that is already executing automatically.
Exactly.
Walk us through the specific architecture of this intention.
The protocol is executed in the transitional window right before sleep. When you're lying in bed, the physical body is relaxing and you are entering that liminal hypnagogic state where the brain waves are slowing down, approaching theta.
Right on the edge of sleep.
Yes. At this precise moment, you are going to implant a specific directive into the inner self. You silently but firmly state this intention. I will become aware of the moment my consciousness leaves my body during sleep. I will remember the experience.
I will become aware of the moment my consciousness leaves my body during sleep. I will remember the experience. The phrasing is very precise. It assumes the action is already going to occur. It just requests awareness of the event.
Yes.
But I want to examine the psychological state required to execute this, because the waking ego is a very clumsy instrument. If I go to bed tonight gritting my teeth, clenching my fists, and intensely demanding that I leave my body, the protocol is going to fail catastrophically, isn't it?
It will absolutely fail. And the mechanics of why it fails are important to understand.
Let's break that down.
The waking ego operates through control and tension. If you attempt to force the projection, you are generating intense beta wave brain activity. You are effectively commanding the physical brain to stay on high alert.
And that tension anchors you.
Right. That localized neurological tension anchors your consciousness rigidly to the physical frame, preventing the very separation you are trying to achieve.
It requires a completely counterintuitive approach. You cannot grasp it directly. Think of it like fluid dynamics or trying to hold water in your hands.
Or catching a butterfly.
Yes. If you aggressively squeeze your fist to capture the water, it shoots out through your fingers. You lose all of it. To hold the water, you have to relax your hands completely, form a receptive bowl, and allow the water to pool naturally. The tension of desire actually destroys the objective.
That fluid dynamic analogy is perfectly aligned with Seth's warnings. He explicitly cautions against forcing or attempting to aggressively orchestrate the state.
The ego just doesn't have the charts to navigate framework 2.
It doesn't. The entire goal of the intention is to plant the seed of awareness into the deeper, multidimensional self, and then you must actively step out of the way.
Surrender control.
Surrender the ego's need for control, and trust the autonomic process to execute the separation, trusting that the inner self will wake the analytical mind at the correct moment.
Okay, so the listener successfully plants the seed, relaxes the grip of the ego, and allows the body to sleep.
Yeah.
What are the specific sensory markers they should anticipate?
This is crucial.
Because if they are unprepared and the protocol works, the sheer novelty of the physical sensations might trigger the autonomic fear override and snap them right back. What are the early diagnostic signs of success?
It is vital to normalize the initial symptoms. It is highly unlikely that on the first night, a beginner will experience a fully lucid, sustained out-of-body excursion. What you're looking for are the transitional markers.
Like what?
For instance, you might wake up suddenly in the middle of the night with a vivid, visceral memory of falling or floating, but the most common and frequently misunderstood marker is the onset of intense internal vibrations.
Let's break down these vibrations.
Yeah.
Because people report this constantly and it usually terrifies them. What is happening mechanically when the body feels like it is buzzing or humming?
It is a frequency mismatch. Your physical biological cells operate at a specific, relatively slow, dense vibrational frequency. Your non-physical consciousness operates at a significantly higher frequency.
So when they separate,
As the consciousness begins to decouple from the nervous system, there is a period where these two vastly different frequencies are interacting. The vibration is the energetic friction of the separation.
like a clutch slipping in a manual transmission before it fully engages the next gear.
Oh,
The
exactly.
gears are spinning at different speeds,
Like-
creating a shudder through the whole vehicle.
Yes, the buzzing, the humming, or the feeling of electrical current running through your limbs is entirely harmless. It is the mechanical signature of the shift.
So what should the listener do if they feel it?
If you experience this, the key is to remain utterly passive. Do not analyze it, do not panic, just observe it. Alternatively, the listener might simply wake up with a fragment of a highly stable, hyper-real, non-physical journey.
A memory that possesses that structural integrity we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the most critical failure point in this entire endeavor, the memory retention.
Yes, the wipe.
The listener experiences the vibration, they have the hyperlucid projection, they wake up astounded, they think, this is incredible, I will never forget this. And then they swing their legs out of bed, think about making coffee, and within 60 seconds, the entire multidimensional experience evaporates into nothingness.
It happens every time if you aren't prepared.
If we don't capture the data, the experiment is useless.
Yeah.
So, what is the exact physical protocol the listener must employ to bypass this memory wipe?
The protocol requires preparation before you even begin the intention. You must place a physical journal and a pen on your nightstand within immediate arm's reach, and it must be physical paper.
We need to explain why. Why is picking up a smartphone to use a notes app a fatal error for this practice?
The moment you open a screen, the intense blue light hits your optic nerve. It sends an immediate aggressive signal to the pineal gland and the cerebral cortex that it is daytime and physical reality requires immediate attention.
A biological alarm bell.
Your brain instantly floods with cortisol. Your brain waves spike from the delicate theta states of recall straight into high alert beta waves, and the neurological pathways holding the non-physical data are instantly overwritten by the demands of Framework 1.
So the screen literally erases the memory.
It does. A physical notebook allows you to keep your eyes half closed, remaining in the liminal twilight state, keeping the beta waves suppressed while you transfer the data.
Okay, so the journal is prepped, the intention is set, the listener sleeps, experiences a fragment, and wakes up. What is the precise sequence of operations at the moment of waking?
The absolute moment awareness returns, whether it's 3.000 a.m., before you shift your physical posture, before you stretch, before you allow a single thought about your daily schedule to form. You reach for the pen.
You don't even move your body.
Do not move. You must capture the data before the waking ego assumes total command of the operating system.
We need to deeply analyze the waking ego here, because it sounds like the ego is actively hostile to this data. Why does the ego function like a delete key for non-physical experiences?
Because the ego is an evolutionary survival mechanism designed strictly for Framework 1. The ego relies on what Seth terms root assumptions to keep you alive.
Root assumptions.
These are the absolute laws of physical reality. Gravity pulls things down, objects are solid, time moves strictly forward, and you are confined to the boundary of your skin. These assumptions allow you to navigate traffic and not walk off cliffs.
They are the source code of physical survival.
Yes. Now, imagine what happens when the projecting consciousness returns and tries to hand the ego a data packet that says, gravity is optional, walls can be walked through, and you exist outside your brain.
Oh man, that data violates every single root assumption the ego relies upon to maintain its structural integrity.
Exactly. If the ego accepts this data, its entire rulebook is invalidated.
It is a massive cognitive dissonance threat.
So, to protect its own operational framework, the ego's immediate autonomic response is to reject the data, scramble it into a nonsensical symbolic dream, or aggressively erase it from short-term memory before it can be integrated.
You are literally racing against the ego's deletion algorithms when you wake up.
You are.
That perfectly explains the sensation of a dream slipping through your fingers the harder you try to remember it. You are watching the ego actively format the hard drive.
That is exactly what is happening.
So what specific data points is the listener trying to write down in those crucial few seconds?
You document any anomaly, any unusual physical sensation or memory fragment, regardless of how trivial it seems. You are specifically scanning your memory for sensations of falling, floating, the vibrational shudder, or the distinct feeling of existing outside the physical body.
Even if it's super brief.
Even if it just feels like a mundane dream where you were hovering slightly above a staircase, you write it down immediately.
And mechanically, what does the physical act of dragging ink across paper achieve in this context?
Yeah.
Why is the journaling the linchpin of the entire process?
By taking a non-physical experience from Framework 2 and forcing it into a concrete physical format in Framework 1, you are fundamentally altering the neurology of your brain.
You're bridging the gap.
You are building a psychological and biological bridge between the waking consciousness and the multidimensional self. You are demonstrating to the waking ego that this data is safe to process, that it will not result in the destruction of the physical organism.
You're slowly updating the ego's root assumptions without triggering its survival panic.
Precisely. And by consistently documenting these fragments, you are sending a clear, undeniable signal to the deeper inner self. I value this communication. The physical hardware is ready to receive more.
And over time, that channel just opens up.
Over time, this daily physical practice widens the bandwidth of the connection. The fragments you recall will become longer, more structurally stable, and eventually fully conscious. This disciplined act of journaling is the literal foundation of sustained conscious projection awareness.
It is an incredibly elegant mechanism. We aren't fighting our biology. We're just gently hacking the translation software of the brain to widen our perceptual aperture.
It's beautifully simple.
So to you, the listener, processing this massive paradigm shift right now, let's do a reality check. If you are sitting there feeling a complex mixture of intense curiosity and, a very real biological tremor of nervousness about initiating this protocol tonight.
Recognize that this is the exact correct response.
Right. You are not preparing to play a mind game. You are preparing to consciously interact with the underlying mechanics of your own existence. You are standing on the threshold of a natural evolutionary frontier of human awareness.
It is a profound reclamation of a capacity that is already yours. The fear will dissolve as the experience validates the safety of the process.
Yeah, the data proves it to the ego.
And this is just the beginning of the architecture. Next time, the final episode of Level 1, bringing dreams and projection into daily life. A simple, sustainable practice.
That integration is where the theory becomes functional reality. But for tonight, the laboratory is your own bedroom. The protocol is set. Keep the physical journal within reach. Plant the seed of the projection awareness intention in that liminal twilight state. Step out of the way and let the autonomic process execute.
Let it unfold naturally.
And I want to leave you with one final structural implication to analyze as your brainwaves slow down tonight. If your consciousness is entirely capable of separating from the biological hardware, if it can navigate complex environments, maintain critical rationality, and process data completely independent of the physical brain, then who exactly is the you that wakes up tomorrow morning? Sleep well and enjoy the journey.